Welcome back everyone to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. You are looking at a project that I decided to take on for myself. I have rescued a serger. This is a home serger, the Elna Lock Pro 5. You can see down here, and it's technically, it's kind of confusing because the model number is called the L5D, D standing for differential feed, and all that really means is that it is more capable of handling very stretchy fabrics, and I mean really stretchy fabrics, than sergers that would have come before it, certainly in the Elna line. Again, this is the first time I've decided to explore rescuing and trying to understand and hopefully, possibly, overhaul this serger. I make no promises. It could totally fail as a project, but when I considered how much I would pay for it, I knew that. And of course, it is, as I may have mentioned in my intro video, it is missing a part of the telescoping rack that holds. It has a thread guide rack, as sergers do. That helps prevent thread tangling off of the cones, which you don't see here. I don't have any cones on there right now. And so I have ordered one. Believe it or not, I was able to find something they say that is going to be compatible with this. I can't get it from Elna anymore. This is a mid-1980s. This thing's 35 years old, give or take. And as I mentioned before, I was in touch with someone online who in 1984 gave $1,000 for that. That's about $2,600 today. So this was no cheap device. And again, Elna is a Swiss brand, or used to be. It's actually not really Swiss anymore, if you really think about it, because it's owned by another company, and Elna machines, anything with Elna's name, are not made in Switzerland. So keep that in mind. The older Elna vintage sewing machines are. But as I mentioned before, home sergers or overlock machines, they go by both names. These were not really created. No one had really developed one for home use until the 1960s, and it's really into the late 60s, early 70s when they start to get some traction and people show a real interest in them in North America, and into the 80s you get even more of them. So by the time home sergers were a thing, most of the production of sewing machines or any kind of machine for sewing in North America had already been outsourced. You know, most of the factories in the US and Canada had been closed. There were a few, but again, the industry had really left North America and Western Europe for in large part. So let's see. I'm going to tilt the angle here. You guys can see a little bit better. So today, I thought I would show you guys, and again, I'm doing this for the first time, okay? I have never taken one of these apart. So I wanted you guys to see me kind of fumble my way through, so that if you have one of these and, you know, you may have a different model, or even if it's a sewing machine, it doesn't even have to be a serger per se. I thought it would be kind of interesting to have you guys watch, as I'm just going to kind of use, you know, you really have to use intuition, care, and caution, because you don't want to harm anything. And yet I want to kind of you know, in the first video we kind of looked around and kind of pointed out what was where we thought there were access screws, and I was just talking about the machine generally and its condition, the way I found it. This one has had some use, you can see, because there's some paint wear here, but that doesn't bother me. And so today I'm going to break this into smaller videos, guys, because I could do a 2-hour video just talking about parts for these things. But today I want to kind of go through with you guys how am I going to get inside? I want to look inside here. I have the power cord and the foot pedal. I have no reason to think it doesn't work, but I haven't plugged it in yet, and I'm not going to run it yet, because I'm going to use the same rule of thumb that I go by for any vintage sewing machine. Most of our home sewing machines that you all have seen me do videos forever on, those are technically called lock stitch machines. When you think of, oh, my home sewing machine does a straight stitch, it's technically called a lock stitch, and it's, you know, arguably one of the most important stitches in sewing. But These were overlock machines, and these were the home domestic descendants of industrial overlockers, which have been around since the 1800s. So, but anyway, I thought we'd just kind of look around. I think you guys may remember. I'm going to close this here for just a minute. We might take a look at it a little bit later. But I think we kind of were looking around to see where any type of screws were. When you're looking at a machine, the first thing you want to look at is, hey, do I see any places where a part might be attached? So I'm going to take the machine and kind of tilt it towards you. And of course, there are 2 screws on the top here. Now, you always have to remember that, and I have the manual to this machine, but it doesn't tell me that much about taking things apart. By the 1980s, manufacturers were already getting away from that. They didn't really give you a lot of hope in how to go in, and they wanted you to take this into the dealer and have it serviced. Okay, I have the service manual, and the service manual gives me information about specific procedures. I don't actually know if it tells me necessarily. Well, this is turning nice. That's good to see. I don't know that it tells me or gives me any specific instructions on how to take panels apart. Why that is, I don't know. Maybe I don't have a full service manual like I thought. Maybe I do. So again, I'm trying this. Now remember, when you go to remove something after you've undone the screws, as you've learned, once we get into the 1970s and certainly in the early 80s, you begin to see sewing machines that have hidden attachments, right? They have clips. Sometimes those clips are made of plastic. You have to be extra careful. So I'm going to lift up here, and I'm lucky, right? It just came right up. It was 2 screws, and it came, the top lifted. Sometimes you always want to do this gently because you don't know. You may have a sewing machine or a serger, and you lift up and it doesn't want to move. It could be stuck, but more likely maybe there's a clip. Maybe it has to be shifted to the right or the left. Why they overcomplicated such things, I don't know. I have a feeling they just didn't want people messing with the machines. But we are going to hack, quote unquote, and try to go inside and take a look. So there's the lid. I'm going to leave the screws in it at the moment. Just set that aside. Now that lid was plastic, no surprise. But let's take a look now. Let's get a little bit more height here. Is there any more height? I'm going to raise the tripod up just a bit here and move this closer so you guys can see. I'm looking down, and well, that's kind of interesting because when you take the lid off, you can't really see. You can see down in here above where the light is. Now, what else have we got here? I'm going to shine my flashlight straight down, and I'm going to hold this, pardon me, while I hold the tripod to give you guys a better view. If you look, guys, I don't know if you can see this necessarily. Let's zoom in here. What I see, if I can get out of my own light here, not sure if this is going to show up on the camera for you guys or not. Yeah, when you look down in there, I see a belt and I see a pulley, which I believe is attached to the hand wheel down here on the right, and of course the other end of the belt should be attached to a motor. So, well, not much to see, but we will continue because there should be, hopefully, more parts that we can remove here. All right, going to zoom back out so you guys aren't missing where I'm taking my fingers. Okay, now let's take a look. Sometimes you want to kind of, you have to kind of use your tuition. I'm going to lower us down just a bit here, bear with me. You want to use your tuition because anytime you look at any machine, they're going to be, if you see screws and what looks like a way to attach something, you want to ask the question, okay, what is it attaching? Here's a screw, it's a Phillips, right? You think, oh, maybe the front face of this thing comes off, and I believe this should come off because I noticed down below, this is steel, right? Steel or iron. So this part of the bed and the side is steel. So I think, just guessing, I think, and up here, by the way, you have steel. So there's some kind of frame or chassis underneath this thing that is metal, thankfully. I don't know how much of modern sergers are metal. Those of you who have new sergers, if you've ever seen inside them, share your comments below because I have no experience with those. So I want to take this off, right? Because I'm seeing steel here and I see plastic. It's got to attach somehow. But notice this screw. Now this screw holds a thread guide, right? And it's adjustable. You can tell because there's a slot here. You could move it up or down. I don't want to touch that right away because I don't know if that's just holding the thread guide on or if it has some other means of, if it has some other purpose. So I'm going to flip this, this little access panel down so we can take a look. And what do we have? I don't see any screws on either side. I see 1, 2 up here, okay? And this is a thread. This is a thread guide as well, but it's sitting on top of the piece here. So I think I'm gonna try loosening these up and kind of put my hand here because I don't want anything flying off or springing out of my sight. And now let's come down. We'll come down and let's look down here. Now with a serger, remember the serger does not have a shuttle and a hook like a sewing machine does. But it has upper tension, obviously, upper thread, and then as the threads come through, and we're going to cover, we're not anywhere close to threading this thing, but you'll notice all these are called loopers, okay, and they help to create the overlock or surged stitch. Now, let's take a look. You want to be real careful, and this is also true when you go underneath, particularly a vintage sewing machine like the others that I've shown restorations of, because there are things that are designed and meant to come off and there are things that are not. So for example, this, I'm going to get, where's my magnet? I need my little magnet so we can, sometimes it's not always easy to know if something is made of heavy plastic or metal, but there's an easy way to find out. This is my little telescoping magnet that I often use to retrieve things I have dropped, but well, that's plastic. This, you would think it feels like metal. No, it's not sticking. Now this could be metal, and I still think this is metal, but it's not. Wait a minute, that's steel. But this piece here that I think is supposed to be metal, it could be, guys, it could be aluminum or some other, could be magnesium. I don't know. It does not feel like plastic, but it's not attracting, you know, magnets only work with ferrous metals like steel and iron. So you can, it's sticking right to these pieces, so we know those are steel. Okay. What do we see down here? Now I see another thread guide and I see screws. Now, when I see this, this is the base of this panel. And if you look, it doesn't, these screws don't just go into this gray material to hold this on. It looks like they go into something, it almost looks white. So we'll just take a chance and see what we can find out. Now remember, anytime you do anything for the first time, always remember it's a really good idea to be sure to take a photo or even video yourself so that when you go to put it back together, you will remember what you did. Now I'm taking this off. This looks like it's a thread guide. You know, there's a lot of complex thread guides. Thread guides are always important, very important on sergers apparently. Now I want to make sure, oh, okay, I thought those were washers, but they're not. They're just part of this thing. So you can see with the screw out, this is kind of what this looks like. You see the holes, right? So I'm going to keep these screws, try to keep them together with the part they come off with. See, if you end up with a pile of screws and the screws are different sizes, you will have a little puzzle at the end you don't really need. And if it's hard to keep them together, I'm going to try just to set this on my table here. But you could also put some tape, just some, you know, some painter's tape or something to make it easy, just to keep them in place. You don't want them going anywhere. So I'm going to set these over here in front of that plastic panel. Just want them to stay put. Okay, now what have we got? Here's our panel. I forgot, even though I just mentioned it to you guys, there's some screws up here with another thread guide. So since I'm making this video, if I forget, I can go back and look at the video and listen to myself if I forget what I did. Because again, it's one thing, some of the vintage sewing machines you guys have seen me work on, I've worked on many of those models multiple times. Sometimes it's because there are more of them available, or it's just a machine I love, like the Singer 201 or the Necky Zigzaggers. I love them so much. I look for them and am glad to be able to restore them more than once, or find more than one to do that with. Okay, so here's another set of thread guides. They have their screws. I don't want to lose those. Do not want to have to go finding one online. So we'll leave that there. Now, I'm going to very carefully, all right, I'm just testing very gently. Don't be rough, because again, we don't know if there's something other. Maybe there are clips in here. If it has clips, especially if they're plastic, you want to be extra careful, because those clips might be necessary to hold this thing on. Okay, I'm getting some movement here. Notice here, there's another thread guide that's kind of holding this. So I need to come up, right, and I need to come out. Now, one thing to notice, and I found this to be the case one time on a lock stick sewing machine, and I honestly don't remember what model it was. Maybe you guys do. But if I put my hand over here on the little hand wheel and I come forward, notice this is essentially the serger's take-up arm, right? Because it comes up and down. So, and you can see the needle bar poking its head up there. Now, what you want to do is make sure that this is in line, because let's say this is down here, right? Now, you'll notice this plastic panel is locked. I cannot get it out. And if you force it and bend it, plastic is not forgiving, guys. It is very unforgiving. And that's especially true of plastic that's 35 years old, and it's a hard plastic. It's not like any plastic. You just be good. Touch any plastic with caution, I guess I would say. Okay, so if I turn this back up, notice I'm kind of lining up the take-up arm. Now when I come up, well, it's still a little bit low. Let's see if I can bring the take-up arm up just a little bit more. Now when I take this panel, oh, that was much better. Okay, I've got the panel in my hand, and it's not a bad idea to point this out. Sometimes you wonder, sometimes you'll notice this with an old metal sewing machine, that the paint will have shifted color a bit. Usually that's because of, you might get a little bit yellowing in the paint. Usually it's because of, just dust and grime or nicotine or whatever. I noticed that this, I thought when I bought this, that this was a cream colored, thought that was a crack. Thankfully it's just fuzz. I thought this was cream colored and red. I thought, oh, that's kind of a cool color scheme, along with the gray. Well, as it turns out, if you look here, guys, here's that thread guide, and it was sitting up behind here. Look at that. Okay, when this was new, it wasn't cream, it was white. And you can see down here below, it's not paint that's scratched off. The plastic is discolored. It could be from exposure to sunlight. It could be exposure to cigarette smoke, or I don't smell anything. This has no cigarette smell whatsoever. But we have the front panel, and it holds something really important. You can see on the back, they're bolted to this plastic, and that is our tension adjustments, right? There are tension discs here. Now, when I first looked at this, I noticed that one of the tension assemblies, that was the word I was looking for, has a check spring, and I'm used to seeing that in a sewing machine, right? Wow. But the others did not, and I thought, oh no, am I going to have to find 3 check springs for this thing? Because I'm assuming, anytime I see a sewing machine, if it's missing a check spring, it's not going to work, because that's part of the tensioning system. Well, I went back, and I wasn't sure, so I went back and looked at the manual that I got, and sure enough, none of these have check springs except this one. So that kind of, that was a sigh of relief. I'm like, well, okay, that's all right. Anyway, I'm not particularly worried about the yellowing. What I do want to look at is, notice this space here, right? This basically rests down on the screws. The screws, which are, Let's go back down here. Here's where the screws came out, right? They go metal into metal, whatever metal this is. Now I'm curious to find out what metal that's made of, because it's not plastic, I can tell. In any event, when I go to put these screws back in, they were not hard to take out. Remember guys, as I've mentioned in other videos with machines, when metal meets plastic, be gentle. Do not over torque it. Don't be in a hurry. And as you slowly put that screw in, as soon as it gets snug, just stop. Right? You just need it to be snug enough so it won't vibrate or rattle. Be kind, okay? And your machine will love you, and you will be a lot happier if you don't crack it. If you do crack it, there are ways to repair that, but that's for another time in video. Okay, I'm going to set this part out of our way, and let's take a look. I have never seen the inside of a SERGER. And if you haven't, or if you have, maybe you've never seen one like this. I don't know. So I'm going to take this. Notice I'm tapping, and this is metal. Because I can see the threads here. I don't know what kind of metal it is, but it's not plastic, and I'm happy about that. Now, what else do you see? Well, you see a lot of, I'm going to zoom in here for you guys so you can see a little bit better, and I'll get my flashlight here. Take a look. Let's see what we see. Right now, I see steel, which makes me happy. I believe that's steel, right? We see dust and fuzz. I'm surprised we don't see more lint than what we do. But remember, sergers typically build up dust and lint a lot faster than sewing machines do. And the reason for that is they cut fabric along with stitching it. So not only do you have the lint generated by a needle or needles puncturing the fabric, you also have cutting of fabric. So you're going to get lint and dust. So I'm surprised there isn't more. What else do we see here? We'll use this little magnet as a pointer. I see, here's a zip tie, but that looks original. That doesn't look like anyone's messed with it. And it's done to hold something to this shaft. And I don't know if you guys can recognize this, but what you are looking at up here, I noticed in the manual, there's a big brass entryway to put oil. And when I see these things, these look like long lengths of the wick that I have shown you guys. Remember, I've shown you guys how I restore the sewing machine motors that have wicks in them, and I add grease lubricant. Well, these are wicks, and I've seen longer wicks in Swiss, like Bernina sewing machines, certainly the free arms, as well as the Husqvarnas. But you can see clearly, in fact, now I'm even seeing what appears to be a little cup holding, I don't know if it's foam. Let's lower down a little bit here, and I'll show you what I'm pointing at. If I can pull it together here. Okay. You guys see right here, this looks like a little plastic housing. It's mounted with a screw. I'm not going to remove it, but inside there looks like, I need something more narrow to see if I can get in there and check it out. Okay, it's either made of foam or it's made of felt. I'm not sure which. Whatever it is, it's designed to hold oil. And the whole reason you have wicks is that because these would not hold grease. These are, the wicks for the motors typically hold grease, but this holds oil. And the whole reason behind this is when you saturate a wick with oil, that allows for a gradual feeding. You don't have to oil it as often, and when you do, you put the oil up here. Otherwise, you'd have to take this panel off, and applying lubrication to something like this, it just is not going to have the same ease of convenience that you would in many of the vintage sewing machines I've been showing you guys over the years. So interesting though. Notice it kind of, they kind of take the wick and it kind of goes in various places. This one here follows all the way down, and it looks like it keeps going. And see if I can tilt the machine. I'm going to have to close the panel so I don't hurt it. Trying to get you guys to see what I'm seeing there. Oops. Look at that. That wick goes all the way down and feeds to another part, right? Which, it has some lint and crap on it, but I see they seem a little more oily, the wicks down there. Maybe gravity has pulled the wick or pulled the oil down there. But you can see, and you'll see it here too, you'll notice the wick, there's a wick that comes over and then it wraps around. They literally wrapped it around the needle bar, which I find interesting. But look, it rides, it's designed to do this. It's riding up and down with the needle bar. And even right here. So I suspect, when all of this wick is oiled, it helps keep oil on the needle bar. And the needle bar is one of the most important places that needs to be oiled because it's constantly, experiencing friction. And it looks like over here, if you take a look, you'll see that I see yellow, which is one of the electrical wires, but it's encased in a clear tubing. And I think that was done, again, just to protect it from friction because you don't want those things to wear. So yeah, we got and this is actually a good place here, guys, to mention, here's another big wick pad. A lot of wicks and pads here made of felt, the purpose of which is to hold on to oil. You still have to oil the machine, but hopefully not as often, because when people use sergers, they're often using a ton of thread. There's a lot of stitches when you serge. What else to show you? This is a good place to mention, guys, and this is another reason why I typically never plug in or run a machine until I've been able to take it apart. Now, if I want to test a motor, if I have a regular sewing machine that has a clutch knob and I can release it when you're going to wind a bobbin, I can do that just to test and make sure the motor runs. That doesn't mean that the machine stitches, but then I'll take my hand on the hand wheel, in this case it's way down here on this serger, and I'll just move it. I'm just looking for movement. If it's a zigzag sewing machine, you can do that manually. That doesn't tell you how much work you have ahead of you, but it does tell you whether the machine is frozen or not, and that's a big thing to know, right? That's going to predict how much time is going to be involved. So that is one of the main reasons I do not run the machine, and I don't put. You'll notice I haven't oiled this thing yet, and this is a good reason. Where are my? Looking for. I'll just use a little lint brush here. I'm looking for my cotton swabs. Don't have any in my hand at the moment, but I'll use my lint brush as an example. If you look really closely, guys, I'm going to put the flashlight here as best I can and maybe zoom in. I don't know if it's picking up on camera, but there's a lot of dust in here, okay? And it's not surprising. There's dust in here, like right in here where oil needs to go, and, not just the stuff that's, down in here. But what happens is if you oil a machine and you have not cleaned it, and not gotten the excess dust or lint out of it, that's a problem. And the reason it's a problem is because if I start oiling this machine and just to say, hey, I want to oil it and crank it up, see if it works, that impatience can create more problems. Because you can imagine what happens when sewing machine oil meets these big giant, clumps of dust or lint. You're going to end up with a sort of fibrous mud, and that is not a good thing for the machine, because then the dust sticks to the oil, and then it can actually be work its way down into the spaces in your moving parts, and you don't want that. So anyway, the big takeaway is here, I'm going to be taking my vacuum attachment. I have these little micro attachments for my shop vac. They were originally created to clean things like laptops, electronics and keyboards, but they're really good for going in little spaces like this. Now I'm going to want to be careful. I don't want to tug on or dislodge any of my wicks. They look fairly secure, but vacuum cleaners You can do a lot of damage if you're not careful. So I'm going to be coming in. I have, again, the attachments are micro size, so it's not like I'm putting a giant vacuum brush in here. And I'm basically going to, vacuum and clean all of this out. And this is one of the primary reasons I really like to see inside what's, and also underneath, right? Because I can come in here and just putting this little lint brush up here, you know, I can already see some lint and dust that need to come out. Again, when you think about this being a serger, it's not as bad as it could have been. I still need to know what's going on down further below because some of this lint will have fallen, and I can see down here already this piece here has oil, right? You can see it moving right here. Where's my, gotta make sure the camera is pointing where I'm pointing. You can see right here, and right in here is, I can see oil, which is dripped down, and dust. So that needs to come out. Will the machine work with that? Maybe. The machines are not dainty, but honest to God, you know, give the machine a break. You know, give it a full cleaning and maintenance. That, you know, it was designed for that. And then we'll see what it can do or not do. I have no idea if this thing's going to run or ever succeed, but I wanted to try. And after almost 10 years of playing with lock stitch machines, I thought, well, let me try this. There's a lot more going on with the serger, a lot more moving parts in a way, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so we've gotten that off. Let's turn this around. Again, be careful. If you grab this machine, it has nice rubber feet that help it stay put. Don't tug on things like plastic covers. Find something solid on the machine and move it that way. You'll be surprised how easy it is to destroy your machine when you're just doing something like moving it. I think I showed this before. This is kind of a side window, not a ton of things to see here. I maybe can get some of the dust out in here, but not a lot. This is again, the safety cover. I believe the needles, according to the manual, you actually have to come over to the side to loosen the clamp. It's not as convenient as a thumb screw, but no big deal. What else can we look at? We're going to pull this to the side, and you can see the underpinnings, the inner workings from the side. Now, if any of you have one of these, whether it's an Elda or another serger, and you can get the side open, you might see this and you might not. The L5D, or excuse me, the L5 model and the L4 and the L3 and the L2 and the L1, none of them have this, because when you see the letter D next to it, that stands for differential feed. And before differential feed was introduced as a feature, you would see, for example, on the L5, you'll see all of this, you just won't see this. And now it's got a plastic knob, and I'm willing to bet, hopefully, it's attached to something steel or metal. This is. Yeah, this is steel. That's steel. Now, but remember, just like I've told you guys, when you're dealing with knobs and levers on the outside of a traditional sewing machine, this plastic is perfectly fine. It's not structural. The steel is. But we need to know, right? We really need to know. You saw me just kind of move it, but again, it may be fine, but I'm so new to these, I'm being extra careful. What we need to do, I can see that this is under tension. It has a little indent, little PIP, little indentation there, and it's going to flop into and lock in the differential. The differential has numbers on it. Again, I have to go back and study the manual on that. But I'm going to make sure that this piece right here, any of the metal workings are working fine. Okay, and that any metal linkages are cleaned and lubricated before I touch this. And as long as I do that, I hopefully, fingers crossed, will not harm this. And let's turn. You guys can see this. I'm turning the hand wheel by hand. You can see some of the loopers here coming into play. And I see lots of metal, which makes me happy. The main thing that I'm not crazy about is the presser foot lifter lever in the back, which is plastic. But honest to God, the first Juki baby locks in 1964, when the Japanese first created these, had steel. But even by the mid-80s, they've already converted to plastic. And the Elna was considered one of the higher quality of the sergers available. It wasn't a cheap serger by any means, as I've discussed with its pricing. But again, you know, cutting costs. It just kills me. I really wish that they had, at least in the parts that really matter structurally, that they. And it's interesting. The color of this material and this material are the same. This is plastic. This is not. Maybe it's aluminum. I really don't know. I can tell you there's enough steel here. This thing is not super lightweight, but okay. Let's get a view. Hold it by its steel. So I grabbed it here by the metal part. That's going to be more robust than any piece of plastic. You really don't want to grab it by plastic. So we're going to look here at the side, and I'm going to reach around the other side and turn the hand wheel, because I want you guys to see all the inner workings of this thing. They're fascinating. I'm really just, you know, so impressed by the engineering that went into this. And you can see all of these moving parts, okay? And I can already see, obviously, a lot of lint gets generated here. And already I can see, well, didn't really come off my hand, but I can see oil and lint together. They look like mud, colorful mud. And I definitely want to get all that off. Like I say, I'm not in a hurry. I know it's very tempting when you get a new toy. It's like, oh, let's plug it in. I want to see it run. Stop. Just stop right there. Please. I say it. Please stop. Take your time. Don't be in a hurry. Now, if this was a machine that someone said, look, I've just done a whole sewing project with it. She's good, but I don't need 3 sergers, and they sell it to you, you might be fine to go ahead and use it and then make sure you've oiled it and so forth. But this thing, I could tell by the dust on it, it had been sitting a while, right? It was not ready for, you know, it's like you just need to take your time and be patient. I see red. Bernina was also good about this. In some of the places, they would put a red paint to help you know where to add oil. But as I mentioned before, that's for normal oiling. In this case, we are waking up a dormant serger, just like the dormant sewing machines. You guys have seen me try to get woken up, as I like to say. Get these old machines to wake up. And so we're going to do more. For example, you don't see a red dot here or here, and many other places where metal is moving against metal. So we will be oiling those as well, not just the red spots. And that's just because, you know, like I say, there's oiling that the owner was typically expected to do, and it would be in the owner's manual. In the service manual, there are other oiling points that only needed to be done when this was taken in for service. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but if you're getting an old machine, just assume you're going to need to oil just about everything that moves if it's metal. And that's just, you know, that's true of any sewing machine, including this. So I'm going to close this here, guys. I don't want it to hang open. And you'll notice, if we tilt back up, I'll show you the side door. I showed this in the first video. This is the side door for the light bulb. It also gives you access down in here. Now, this, I believe, the pins that it turns on are metal, but look at the hinges, okay? These hinges are plastic. I don't see any cracks, but this is old. Even if it were new, be gentle. I sometimes watch people with machines on videos, and they just rough. They're slapping and smacking stuff around. I wouldn't do that with a new one. And with this one, just be gentle. Even the clasp. Remember on the vintage sewing machines how these little clips are often steel and they fit and they kind of have a tension to keep them shut? This is plastic, okay? Be very gentle. And you will be happier in the long run. Okay. What else can I take off here? I am trying to understand this side panel. Now, I'm going to pull back a minute. I want you guys to see more of it than what's showing up on the camera. So this panel here, I'm still not quite sure how it attaches to the chassis. I see a screw here. Okay, so I'll turn that one and see what I find. You never know, right? You cannot assume. It's not in the service manual. I'm not sure why. It's kind of confusing to me. Oh, I just took advantage of my magnet here and got this to come out. So this is a long screw. Again, if you're doing this for the first time, either make notes or photograph or video yourself so you don't have to go researching where one screw goes. Now notice if I pull on this, I'm not getting any movement. This tells me there's something else attaching this, okay? Don't force it. Plastic doesn't typically jam or get stuck that badly. It's not like metal to metal parts. So tread lightly, guys. Let's see, what else do we have here? There is a screw, actually. Let's see here if I can lower the, I don't know if it will show up here or not. First thing I'm going to do is put my little hatch back. I'm worried that's going to break if I'm not careful. There's a screw here, right there underneath this thread stand, so we'll take it out. Now sometimes, like I said, you may find that you take a screw out and it removes something, but it doesn't actually accomplish what you wanted because it had a different purpose, right? So I'm taking this out. Woo, come here. Now this screw has a washer on it. There it is, okay? Do not lose the washer, keep it. If you do, you can get a replacement, but who wants to make a trip to a hardware store during COVID, or any time for that matter? So, don't let that washer go away because the washer has a purpose. It kind of gives you a support for when the screw goes into, actually, I say it screws into metal, but it actually comes up against plastic. If the screw head hits the plastic without the washer, it's going to put extra wear and pressure on what is basically a plastic opening. Again, gentle is really important. Now when I first got this, I thought, oh, it's olive green and cream. Well, just like the plastic you saw that is not really cream, it's white. This was gray. You see it underneath, right? So again, it could be exposure to light. It could be exposure to who knows what. But it's yellowed over time, and you'll see this stripe. This is what they often refer to as ghost marks. At least in architecture, they'll call it a ghost mark. I'm going to put this back on here just so I don't have to memorize where everything goes. So these are ghost marks. So now we know that this machine never was, when it was new, it was never olive and cream. It was gray and white, right, with the red Elna lettering. So it's kind of interesting. I have yet to figure out what I'm going to do. I may leave it this color. I don't know. Let's see, what does this say? Nova Sewing Machines, Ottawa Street, North Hamilton. Okay, that's where it was serviced last, but I don't know if that's where it was bought. Hamilton, Ontario there. Okay, so I cannot get this to, I'm pulling, just gently pulling, and it's too resistant. There's something holding this on, and I am not going to, I'm not going to dare mess with it yet, because I want to make sure I know. Now this here is kind of interesting. Behind this is a shaft that looks like, well, we know it's a shaft because it held this very long screw. This is kind of interesting because this shaft screws all the way in from this, come here. Okay, this screws in like that, right? But this, wait a minute. Sorry, I've got the wrong. If you do this too, don't feel bad. Okay, it actually went over here. That's where this screw went. Okay, but this, I believe, is this is actually a screw that it is tapped with threads to hold this screw, right? So this is kind of like, it kind of like piggybacks onto here. So with that in mind, with that assumption, if I dare make an assumption, which Usually does not work out very well for me, but I'm going to try this because I believe, if you look here guys, you see the slot? I believe this is going to be turnable, and this is what's mounting this. I don't know it for a fact because I've never done it before, and that's part of the reason I want you guys to see me doing this. Sometimes watching another person do something and not totally know what they're doing or figuring out as they go will hopefully make you feel less afraid to tackle your own. So without totally destroying the camera view here, I'm going to have to move the tripod, move you guys to the side there a little bit. Okay, this turned. It did what I imagined. If any of you know what this is called, please share it. I'm willing to bet this thing has on the end a bolt with threads on it. Aha! And that was a total guess, guys. Look at that. So this has two functions, right? Let me pull it up close so you can see it. We have some good lighting today. You see there where I put the flathead screwdriver? So on this end are the threads that screw into the main portion of the machine. Hold on. Okay, so here's the frame, the metal frame. This screws into the metal frame, but it's a long screw that allows this amount of space, and then at the end they've actually put in a place for the attachment screw for the little thread stand to go. Very clever. But again, hopefully that is what I was trying to locate. Ah, now she comes. Well, let's see. I don't want to get too cocky here. Aha. And what do we have inside, guys? Don't be surprised. Look at that. We got plenty of lint. Again, this is normal. Doesn't mean that the prior owner hurt this machine. They were not, this is the nature of sewing machines generally, and I think SERGERs even more so. Now, we have a new window. Now, what am I going to do here? I'm going to take this screw, so I don't confuse myself any further, and I'm just going to simply put it in there. It's not really threaded into anything, but I just want to set her down. Okay, wow. What do we have here? What we have, I believe, as I'm going to lower you guys back down, it's like being on an elevator. Trying to get you guys a really good view here. So here's our hand wheel. And again, by the 80s, the hand wheel is made of plastic. It is not steel. Be nice to your hand wheel, okay? And hopefully it will serve many more years. Here's our plug. This looks like an insulator of some sort to this little brown, let me just pull this over here. You guys can see a little brown, looks like a pad of some sort. I think that's what that is. I don't know completely. Kind of interesting to see. It seems the belt is in good condition. It's not orange. It looks like it has dust on it or some dirt, but I'm just going to roll the hand wheel and look for cracks. I don't see any. I don't see any cracks above, but then let's come over here on the side. Sometimes you will see cracks in the side of a belt, but I don't really see any. Everything, it seems to look okay. Whether this is the original belt, I don't know. I suspect it may not be, but it doesn't matter. I would be very surprised if it didn't need at least one belt replacement, depending on how often it was used in 30-something years. Okay. Now, taking again, I'm grabbing by the steel or the metal part up here. Let's see what we can see if we tilt her up. Well, there's not that much to see. You see the power switch. Feels nice and solid. Behind here, here's the motor pulley. Need my pointer. Here's the motor pulley, and here's the motor. Right there. Which is currently not that easy to see because the bracket is pretty beefy. Look at the size of this bracket here. I mean, that bracket is, if I put some light on it for you guys, it might help. This bracket is pretty beefy, a lot beefier than, say, a vintage sewing machine. I'm not sure if that's because it's a serger or just that's because how Elna wanted it designed. Couldn't really tell you. The drive shaft behind this wheel is steel. That's a lovely thing to see. Now, normally, I say normally, if there is such a thing, with sewing machines from the vintage period, you often will see either a bottom panel that you can remove and take a look at, or there's, you just lift the machine up and you can see the whole undersides and inner workings of it. Now, let's see, I'm going to turn around again, I'm grabbing by that metal up there I told you guys about. I want to be extra careful. Okay, what else do we have? All right. I'm going to take off this thread stand. Those of you who have newer sergers, let me know if your serger allows you to take any of this stuff off, because the newer the item, we need a Phillips head. The newer the item, the less likely you're able to disassemble anything. They really... Okay, that was a little sticky, but it came loose. See the other one. Again, this may have been on here since the day it was made in the factory. Again, this was made in Japan. The early sergers, as I said, home sergers or overlockers, they were invented in Japan. And over time, production was moved away from Japan to Taiwan, and now most of it is made in China, some in Taiwan. There may be a few serger models made in Japan still, but anyway, I took this off. You see these two holes. This did not hold any cover. This is steel, excuse me, this is metal. I still don't know what kind. So I'm going to take this off. Oh, by the way, there's another reason why I wanted this removed. You guys can see right here, that is a screw and a washer that holds what was the telescoping, it looks like an old school antenna for televisions that people had on their houses in the 50s. And it was broken. It's fairly vulnerable because it looks like a little clothesline maybe. Anyway, I have ordered a replacement for it, and I'm happy to see that I don't have to order this whole piece. With a lot of consumer products today, if you can order anything at all, they don't let you do that. You have to order everything and be wasteful. So I'll see if I'll leave this off because I'm going to need to have it off. It'll make it easier to replace the piece I want. Okay, now I'm going to have to be careful how I tilt this because I don't want to damage anything on the front like that little access panel. So I'm going to have to hold this. I'm going to show you guys. You guys see under here? Look at where my thumb is. You see the two screws? Those two screws are holding on this little piece, I think. Now, I don't see anything else that would attach it, okay? Although, I want to point this out. Remember I told you guys you sometimes have plastic clips? So when I took this big panel off, notice that it was being stabilized by this piece of plastic. I'm sure this is showing up. Yeah. This piece of plastic right here, it's a tab. It's built into this cover. These things are notorious for being brittle. This one's fine, but again, when I took it off, if this thing had fought me, if it had been pulling or tugging like a dog with a toy, I would have stopped because maybe I had to do some other motion, but I didn't, thankfully. It came off. But this is an example of what I was talking about. When I say be gentle, I'm not kidding. It would really hurt to think, gosh, you have this old machine, and then in the process of trying to fix it, you broke it, or broke part of it. Okay, I showed you all the screws under here. I don't see any on the side. I can't tell if there's a clip in here anywhere, but I'm going to have to get these screws off. And I can't really... I showed you guys the screws. They're Phillips heads, and they should come off. Thankfully, most of these screws, they have different lengths. However, they are the same Phillips size so far. That's merciful, because you don't always see that. Now I want to make sure they don't... See if I can do this without them falling on the floor. If they do, then, well, won't be the first time I drop screws on the floor. Better than dropping a machine on the floor, which I have not done, knock on wood, you will want to make sure that that you can get your screws. You don't want them disappearing on you if they run on the floor. Okay, there it is, guys, and it came right off. There were no, I told you I would drop one. There were no clips here, right? But you always want to do. If you take those screws out and this thing fights you and if it tugs and it won't come loose, you just want to stop and kind of poke around, take a flashlight, and see if you can figure out what is causing it to pull back on you. Metal will sometimes stick if it has old oil in it. Okay. Now, there is our motor. It says Matsushita Electric, so it doesn't say made in Japan. The machine does. Matsushita is a Japanese electric company. Given it was 1984, I'm going to make the assumption that this motor was made in Japan. Okay, because by this point, it's not like in the 50s when they had to, the Japanese would ship over, the main bodies of a sewing machine, and then the distributors would have to source motors and foot pedals in North America. By the 80s, the Japanese are making not only electrical stuff for their system, but they can make it for anywhere in the world, basically. So we have a place for brushes. Now, what I don't know is, if I see two big screws here, guys, on the base. No, I see three. Excuse me. There's a third one right there. 1, 2, 3. Now, I have to ascertain something. I don't yet know if I release those screws, do I have a bottom pan and then the chassis that I can get underneath? Or are the mechanicals somehow attached to the base? That's not clear to me, so I'm going to have to investigate a little bit more. But that's for today, guys. I just wanted you to see. I have taken off basically every panel that I can. I don't have a need to take this off. This is a spring-loaded piece. Let's see. Oh, and by the way, well, I found a washer. This washer was sitting right down in here. If any of you know what this goes to, please feel free to list a comment, because I have no clue. It was just sitting there, and when I see that, that tells me, okay, a washer is there for a reason. It went someplace, but where that place is, I have not a clue. I don't know. I'll have to poke around and see if something, it should fit exactly, right? It doesn't fit on there, I don't believe. So again, this will happen to you sometimes. You'll find a part, it's like, I don't know what that goes to. Do not throw it away, because you may find that you really do need that. So I'll be setting that aside. But thank you all for watching this. I told you I was going to do the videos for this SERGER in installments, and I am. I had no idea it would be this long of a video, but I wanted to kind of go around and kind of show you, if you've got particularly an old SERGER and you can take it apart this much, just kind of just get a feel for where things are and what does the inside look at. Right now, I'm going to get this cleaned out. I'm going to take my vacuum. I will not subject you guys to listening to the vacuum, but I will. I'll go in, vacuum out what I can, and then I will contemplate those screws underneath. If you guys know what this looks like when you take the bottom screws off, let me know. Thank you all for watching me and watching me sort of make my way awkwardly through my very first home SERGER. 10 years of working on home sewing machines from the vintage era has certainly been helpful. And I think it doesn't really help me understand how SERGERs work, but it told me what I should and should not do, how to be careful with anything that's old. And it's not just sewing machines. If you ever take any old machine apart, give it the benefit of the doubt. It's old, it's tired, be a little more gentle with it. And that's true even with metal parts. But anyway, there you go, guys. That is the Elna Lock Pro 5, otherwise known as the Elna L5D, as in differential. And so we're off and running. I have no idea how this will turn out, but I got fingers crossed. And if any of you guys have anything to share, please do, because we all learn from each other, and I have a lot to learn when it comes to vintage Sergers. Take care, everyone, and we will see you in the next video.